The scream echoed through the marble halls of the Lysander estate at 3:47 in the morning, and every servant who heard it pressed themselves against the nearest wall and prayed they wouldn't be blamed. Rosalind Newman had been working at the Grand Manor for exactly 4 hours when she heard that scream, and unlike the others, she didn't freeze. She was carrying fresh linens through the east corridor when the sound pierced the silence, a child's voice twisted with terror and rage. Without thinking, she dropped the sheets and ran toward it. "No, miss, don't!" Another maid, gray-haired and trembling, grabbed at her arm. "That's the little mistress. You mustn't go near her when she's having one of her fits." Rosalind pulled free. "She sounds terrified. She's dangerous. The last maid who tried to help her ended up with broken ribs and a fractured skull. The child doesn't know her own strength." But Rosalind was already running, following the sounds of sobbing and crashing furniture. She reached a set of carved double doors that hung partially open, one hinge bent at an impossible angle. Inside, a bedroom that must have once been beautiful lay in ruins. Shredded curtains hung from twisted rods. The four-poster bed had been overturned. Deep claw marks scored the walls. In the center of the destruction stood a girl who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. She was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. White hair cascaded past her shoulders in wild tangles, and her skin was pale as moonlight, almost luminescent in the dim room. She wore a nightgown stained with what looked like blood, though Rosalind couldn't see any wounds. But it was her eyes that made Rosalind's breath catch. They glowed crimson, bright, and feral, filled with an animal panic that no child should ever know. The girl held a broken chair leg in both hands, brandishing it at shadows that didn't exist. She was sobbing, but the sounds were punctuated with snarls. "Get away from me!" the child shrieked at nothing. "I won't let you take me. I won't." Rosalind's heart clenched. She'd seen this before, in her youngest sister after their house fire. Night terrors so vivid the child couldn't distinguish dream from reality. "Sweetheart," Rosalind said softly, stepping into the room with her hands visible and empty. "You're safe. Whatever you're seeing, it isn't real." The glowing red eyes snapped to her. Up close, Rosalind could see the girl's fangs, small but wickedly sharp, extending past her lower lip. She hissed, and the sound raised every hair on Rosalind's arms. "I'll hurt you," the girl warned, her voice breaking. "I hurt everyone. You should run." "I don't think you want to hurt anyone," Rosalind said, taking another careful step forward. "I think you're scared, and you're trying to protect yourself from something that isn't there. But look around, sweetheart. You're in your bedroom. You're safe." "Nowhere is safe," the girl's voice rose to a wail. "They're always there in the dark waiting to take me away." Rosalind knelt down, making herself smaller, less threatening. "What if I promise that I won't let anything take you? What if someone stayed with you so you wouldn't have to be afraid alone?" The crimson eyes flickered, confusion replacing some of the fear. "You'd stay, even though I'm a monster?" "You're not a monster. You're a frightened little girl who needs a friend." Rosalind extended her hand, palm up, waiting. "My name is Rosalind. What's yours?" For a long moment, the girl just stared at Rosalind's hand as if she'd never seen such a gesture before. The chair leg clattered to the floor. Her small frame shook with suppressed sobs. "Ravenna," she whispered. "My name is Ravenna." "That's a beautiful name." Rosalind kept her hand steady, though her arm was beginning to ache from the position. "Will you take my hand, Ravenna? I promise I'm not afraid of you." "You should be," Ravenna said, but she was already reaching out, her small fingers trembling as they touched Rosalind's palm. "Everyone else is." The moment their skin made contact, Ravenna collapsed forward into Rosalind's arms, her small body racked with sobs. Rosalind gathered the child close, rocking her gently and murmuring nonsense comfort words. The girl clung to her with supernatural strength, but Rosalind barely noticed the pain. All she could feel was the desperate loneliness radiating from this strange, powerful child. "There now," Rosalind whispered. "I've got you. You're safe." Behind her, she heard shocked gasps. The gray-haired maid stood in the doorway with 3 others, all staring as if witnessing a miracle. "How did you—" one began. "She needs rest," Rosalind said firmly, still holding Ravenna. "And this room needs to be cleaned, tomorrow. Right now, she needs peace and quiet." With careful movements, Rosalind lifted Ravenna, surprisingly light for a child with inhuman strength, and carried her to a small sofa that had escaped destruction. She sat with the girl cradled against her chest, still murmuring soft reassurances. Within minutes, Ravenna's sobs faded to hiccups, then to steady breathing. The red glow in her eyes dimmed to a more natural crimson, then finally closed. Only when the child was deeply asleep did Rosalind allow herself to look around at the true extent of the damage. The room looked like a battlefield, and this happened regularly, according to the other maid. "You're either very brave or very stupid," a voice said from the doorway. Rosalind looked up to find a man standing in the shadows, and her breath caught for an entirely different reason than fear. He was tall and imposing, dressed in an immaculate black suit that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. His hair was pure white, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Aristocratic features, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. But it was his eyes that held her. Deep crimson, ancient and knowing, watching her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see straight through her. This was the vampire king himself, Yorick Lysander. She'd heard the whispers among the staff during her brief training. The most powerful vampire in the region, possibly the world, centuries old, ruthless with his enemies, exacting with his servants. He'd taken power through force and held it through fear. He had no queen, no consort. Only his strange daughter, born of circumstances no one dared ask about. Rosalind straightened her spine, though she didn't move from her position with Ravenna sleeping against her. "I'm employed here to work, sir. The child needed help." "The child is dangerous," Yorick said, moving into the room with the fluid grace of a predator. "She's killed before, though not intentionally. Her power is vast and uncontrolled. Most adults flee from her in terror." "Most adults are fools, then." The words escaped before Rosalind could stop them. She winced, waiting for anger, but Yorick's expression didn't change. "You're the new human maid. Rosalind Newman. 23 years old, youngest of 5 children, educated beyond your station, working here because your family needs the money." His eyes narrowed. "You lasted 4 hours before breaking protocol and entering the young mistress's chambers uninvited." She was screaming. She screams often. Then someone should help her more often. Rosalind met his gaze directly, refusing to look away despite every instinct screaming at her to show submission to this apex predator. "With respect, sir, she's a terrified child having night terrors. She doesn't need to be avoided. She needs consistency, comfort, and someone who won't abandon her the moment things get difficult." Something flickered in Yorick's eyes, or surprise perhaps, or something deeper. "You speak very boldly for a human in a vampire's domain. You hired me for my service, not my silence." Rosalind glanced down at Ravenna's peaceful face. "Though if being honest means I'm dismissed, I understand. But please, find someone else who won't be afraid of her. She's suffering." Yorick was silent for so long that Rosalind began to think she truly had gone too far. Then he moved closer, looking down at his daughter with an expression that transformed his severe features into something unexpectedly tender. "I've tried everything," he said quietly. "Healers, blood magic, sleep spells, therapists who specialize in young vampires. Nothing works. The terrors have plagued her since she was born. They're getting worse." His jaw tightened. "I'm losing her to her own mind, and I don't know how to save her." The raw pain in his voice made Rosalind's chest ache. This wasn't the ruthless vampire king of legend. This was a desperate father watching his child suffer. "Maybe she doesn't need magic," Rosalind suggested carefully. "Maybe she just needs to know she's not alone, that someone will be there when she wakes up afraid." Yorick's gaze shifted back to her. "You're volunteering." "I'm already here." Rosalind adjusted her hold on Ravenna, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. "And she's already let me help once. Children with night terrors need routine, familiar faces, consistent comfort. I could stay with her, be her companion during the day, her guard at night. You'd be in constant danger. When the terrors take her, she doesn't recognize friend from foe. She has the strength of 10 grown men and the speed of wind itself. She could kill you without meaning to. I've faced worse odds." Rosalind thought of her sister, small and fragile in the hospital after the fire, doctors saying she'd never recover. But with patience and love, she had. "I'm not afraid, Lord Lysander, and I think Ravenna needs someone who isn't afraid." Yorick studied her for another long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Very well. Your position is changed effective immediately. You'll serve as Ravenna's personal companion and caretaker. You'll have rooms adjacent to hers, full access to her chambers, and authority to make decisions regarding her care. Your salary will triple. Rosalind blinked. Sir, that's non-negotiable. If you're going to risk your life for my daughter, you'll be compensated appropriately. He moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Newman, thank you for seeing her as a child rather than a monster. It's more than most can manage. Then he was gone, leaving Rosalind alone with the sleeping girl in her arms and the weight of a responsibility she was only beginning to understand. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that slowly, carefully, began to bring light back into Ravenna's world. Rosalind moved into the suite adjacent to the girls' chambers, separated by a door that was never locked. She was there when Ravenna woke each morning, crimson eyes wary and searching until they found Rosalind's face and relaxed. She was there for lessons with the vampire tutors who taught history and etiquette and the complex politics of their kind. She was there for meals, blood for Ravenna, regular food for herself, shared at a small table by the window. Most importantly, she was there at night. The terrors came 3 or 4 times a week. Rosalind learned to recognize the signs. Ravenna's breathing would quicken, her fingers would start to twitch, and then the screaming would begin. Each time, Rosalind would rush in before the destruction could truly start. She'd speak in low, calm tones, reminding Ravenna where she was, who she was, that she was safe. Sometimes Ravenna would wake quickly. Other times, Rosalind would have to dodge thrown furniture and shattering glass while maintaining her steady reassurance. She collected bruises like badges of honor, a split lip from a flung book, cracked ribs from when Ravenna had thrown her across the room while still asleep, a sprained wrist from catching herself during another such incident. But slowly, incrementally, things improved. The terrors grew slightly less frequent. Ravenna began waking faster when Rosalind called to her. The destruction lessened. And during the day, the haunted look in the girl's eyes gradually faded, replaced by something Rosalind had never seen there before: hope. Will you read to me? Ravenna asked one afternoon, curled in a window seat overlooking the estate's extensive gardens. She looked younger than her 7 years, vulnerable in a way that made Rosalind's protective instincts surge. Of course. Rosalind settled beside her with a book of fairy tales. Which story would you like? The one about the princess who wasn't afraid. Ravenna leaned against Rosalind's shoulder, a gesture of trust that still felt precious. I like that one. As Rosalind read, she was aware of a presence in the doorway. Yorick stood there, silent and watching, as he often did. He never interrupted, never interfered with Rosalind's methods. But he was there, observing his daughter's transformation with eyes that held a complicated mix of emotions. Their interactions were brief and professional. He'd ask after Ravenna's progress. Rosalind would report honestly, neither minimizing the challenges nor overstating the victories. He'd nod, thank her with formal courtesy, and leave. But sometimes Rosalind would catch him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Curiosity, perhaps, or something deeper that made her heart beat faster. She told herself it was ridiculous. He was the vampire king, an ancient and powerful immortal. She was a human maid, temporary and fragile. Whatever attention he paid her was purely concern for his daughter's welfare. But it was hard to ignore the way her breath caught when he entered a room, or how her skin seemed to warm under his gaze. 2 months after Rosalind had taken Ravenna's hand for the first time, everything changed. It was one of the rare nights when Ravenna had slept peacefully until dawn. Rosalind was in the estate's library researching childhood trauma in vampires when Yorick found her. Miss Newman, a moment of your time. She looked up from her book, surprised. It was barely past sunset, and he usually spent his early evenings in meetings with his court advisors. Of course, my lord. Is something wrong? On the contrary, he gestured to the chair across from her. May I? She nodded, confused but intrigued. He sat with fluid grace, studying her with those ancient crimson eyes. I wanted to thank you properly, he said. What you've done for Ravenna is nothing short of miraculous. She smiles now. She laughs. The terrors haven't stopped, but they're manageable. She's starting to live rather than merely survive. He paused. I'm in your debt, Miss Newman. I'm just doing my job. No, you're doing far more than that. He leaned forward slightly. You care for her, genuinely, not because I pay you, but because you see her worth. Do you know how rare that is? How many people look at my daughter and see only a monster to be feared or pitied? Rosalind's throat tightened. She's easy to care for once you look past the fear. She's intelligent and kind and so desperate to be loved. Anyone who can't see that isn't looking properly. Then most of the world is blind. Yorick's expression softened in a way that transformed him from intimidating king to something far more human. I've ruled for 300 years, Miss Newman. I've commanded armies, destroyed enemies, built empires. But I couldn't help my own daughter. You managed it in weeks. How? I listened to her. I stayed. Rosalind met his gaze. Sometimes the most powerful magic is just being present for someone who's afraid. Yorick was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Tell me about yourself, your family, how you came to work here. It should have felt like an interrogation, but his tone was genuinely curious. So Rosalind told him about her siblings, about her parents who died when she was 19, leaving her to raise her younger brothers and sisters, about working 3 jobs to keep them fed and housed, about her youngest sister's recovery from the fire, and how that experience had taught her that patience and love could overcome almost anything. Yorick listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he was truly hearing her. And somehow, the conversation shifted from her history to books they'd both read, to philosophy and art, and the strange beauty of watching seasons change. You speak like someone educated, Yorick observed, yet you work as a servant. Education doesn't pay the bills, unfortunately, but I've never regretted learning. Knowledge is its own reward. Rosalind smiled. Though I admit, reading about vampire history in books is very different from living among vampires. The reality is far more complex than the stories suggest. Most humans are too afraid to see the complexity. They see only the monster. His gaze held hers. You seem to have a gift for looking past surfaces, Miss Newman. Rosalind, she said impulsively. When we're speaking privately, you can call me Rosalind. Something flickered in his expression. Pleasure, perhaps. Then you must call me Yorick, at least when my court isn't watching. It felt like a threshold being crossed, though Rosalind couldn't quite define it. The formality between them had shifted into something more personal, more dangerous. She should have been afraid. Instead, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Their conversations became regular occurrences. After Ravenna was asleep, Yorick would find Rosalind in the library or the gardens, and they'd talk for hours. He told her about his long life, the rise and fall of kingdoms, the weight of immortality. She shared her dreams, her fears, her fierce love for her family. And slowly, without either of them quite acknowledging it, something grew between them, a connection that had nothing to do with Ravenna and everything to do with 2 people who understood loneliness, recognizing it in each other. Rosalind tried to fight it. This was madness. He was her employer, an immortal king, a creature of legend. She was human, temporary, insignificant in the scope of his existence. But fighting didn't stop her heart from racing when he smiled. It didn't stop her from looking forward to their late-night conversations. It didn't stop her from falling. She told herself it was one-sided, that he was simply grateful for her help with Ravenna, nothing more. But sometimes she'd catch him watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with hunger. Not for blood, but for something far more dangerous. 3 months into her tenure, the fragile peace shattered. Rosalind woke to Ravenna's screams, but these were different, not the confused terror of nightmares, but real, waking fear. She ran into the girls' chambers to find 3 vampires she didn't recognize surrounding Ravenna's bed. They wore the formal attire of court officials, but their expressions were cold and hostile. Ravenna had backed herself into a corner, eyes glowing crimson, fangs bared. She was snarling, feral, and terrified. What's happening? Rosalind demanded, positioning herself between Ravenna and the strangers. Stand aside, human, one of the vampires said dismissively. This is court business. This is a child's bedroom in the middle of the night. Court business can wait until morning. The council has decided that the young mistress is too dangerous to remain in the main estate. She'll be moved to the south wing, where she can be properly contained. Rosalind's blood ran cold. The South Wing was essentially a prison built to hold rogue vampires who'd lost control. Absolutely not. You're not taking her anywhere. You have no authority here, mortal. I have Lord Lysander's direct authorization regarding Ravenna's care, which means I absolutely have authority. And I'm telling you to leave. Now. The vampire who'd spoken took a threatening step forward. You dare command us? I could snap your neck before you drew another breath. Then you'd have to explain to Lord Lysander why you killed his daughter's companion and traumatized the child he entrusted to my care. Rosalind held her ground despite her racing heart. Somehow, I don't think he'd be pleased. Father! Ravenna's voice was high and desperate. Rosalind, where's my father? I'm here. Yorick's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stood in the doorway, and Rosalind had never seen him look so dangerous. His eyes blazed crimson fire. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The three vampire officials immediately bowed their heads in submission. Explain, Yorick said, his voice deadly quiet. Explain why you're in my daughter's chambers without my permission, terrifying her in the middle of the night. My lord, the council has no authority over my daughter. I rule here, not the council. Or have you forgotten that? He moved into the room with predatory grace. Who gave the order? The vampires exchanged glances. Finally, one spoke. Lord Draven suggested that the young mistress's instability poses a risk to the estate. Several council members agreed. We were simply acting in the court's best interests. Draven. Yorick's expression could have frozen blood. Of course. He's been positioning for more power since I denied his request for a seat on my inner council. He looked at each vampire in turn. Here's what's going to happen. You will return to the council chambers and inform them that anyone who attempts to interfere with my daughter again will face me personally. Am I clear? Yes, my lord. Get out, all of you. They fled with inhuman speed, and Rosalind released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Then she turned to find Ravenna still pressed into the corner, shaking violently. Oh, sweetheart. Rosalind crossed to her immediately, opening her arms. Ravenna crashed into her, sobbing. They wanted to lock me up. I heard them talking about chains and cells. I'm not a monster, Rosalind. I'm not. I know you're not. I know. Rosalind held her tight, meeting Yorick's gaze over his daughter's head. His expression was tortured. I should have expected this, he said heavily. Draven has always been ambitious. Using Ravenna's condition to undermine me is exactly his strategy. He moved closer, reaching out to touch his daughter's hair with infinite gentleness. I'm sorry, little one. I failed to protect you. You didn't fail, Rosalind said firmly. You stopped it. But this is going to happen again unless you address the root problem. Which is, the council fears what they don't understand. They see Ravenna's power and her struggles, and they imagine worst-case scenarios. Rosalind adjusted her hold on Ravenna, who was starting to calm. They need to see what I see. A child who's learning to control her abilities, who's making progress every day. They need to see her as a person, not a threat. Yorick frowned. You're suggesting I parade my daughter before the council? She's terrified of strangers. I'm suggesting you let them see her when she's at her best. Controlled circumstances, brief visits, supervised by you and me. Let them witness her growth. Rosalind met his eyes. Right now they're making decisions based on fear and rumor. Give them facts instead. He considered this, then nodded slowly. It's risky, but you're right. The current situation is untenable. He looked down at Ravenna. What do you think, little one? Would you be willing to let some of the council members meet you? Rosalind and I would be right there with you. Ravenna pulled back slightly, her tear-stained face uncertain. Would they hurt me? Not while I live, Yorick promised with fierce intensity. Never while I live. Then I'll try. Ravenna looked at Rosalind. If you're there, I can be brave. Rosalind's heart clenched. I'll be right beside you, I promise. The next week was spent in careful preparation. Yorick selected 3 council members who were neutral toward Ravenna, neither hostile nor particularly sympathetic. Rosalind worked with Ravenna on staying calm around strangers, practicing introductions and polite conversation. What if I lose control? Ravenna asked the night before the scheduled meeting. They were in her chambers, Rosalind brushing the girl's long white hair with gentle strokes. Then your father and I will handle it. But I don't think you will. You're so much stronger than you give yourself credit for." Rosalind set down the brush and turned Ravenna to face her. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" Ravenna shook her head. "I see a brave, intelligent girl who fights every single day to overcome challenges that would break most people. I see someone who cares deeply about others, who's learning to control incredible power, who's kind even when she's afraid." Rosalind cupped Ravenna's face gently. "I see someone extraordinary, and tomorrow the council will see it too." Tears welled in Ravenna's crimson eyes. "I love you, Rosalind. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Rosalind's throat tightened. "I love you too, sweetheart. So much." They held each other in the quiet of the room, and Rosalind sent up a silent prayer that tomorrow would go smoothly. Ravenna had come so far. She deserved to be seen for who she truly was. The meeting took place in one of the estate's smaller parlors, elegant but not intimidating. Yorick sat in a high-backed chair, regal and commanding. Rosalind stood beside Ravenna, one hand resting supportively on the girl's shoulder. The three council members entered: Lady Seraphine, an elegant vampire with centuries of diplomatic experience; Lord Casimir, who oversaw the court's financial interests; and Dame Basilica, who commanded the estate's guard forces. All three stopped short when they saw Ravenna, and Rosalind felt the girl tense under her hand. "It's all right," Rosalind murmured. "Just breathe." Ravenna nodded slightly, then performed the formal curtsy she'd been practicing. "Good evening. Thank you for accepting my father's invitation." Her voice was steady, her posture perfect. Pride surged through Rosalind. Lady Seraphine recovered first, offering a graceful bow. "The honor is ours, young mistress. It's a pleasure to finally meet you properly." The conversation that followed was careful and formal. The council members asked polite questions about Ravenna's studies, her interests, her progress. Ravenna answered with poise that belied her 7 years, intelligent and thoughtful. Then Lord Casimir said, "We've heard reports of your episodes, the night terrors. They've caused significant damage to the estate." Ravenna's hand found Rosalind's, squeezing tight, but her voice remained steady. "Yes, sir. I have nightmares sometimes. They used to be very bad, but Rosalind's been helping me. They're much better now." "Your companion seems quite devoted to you." Dame Basilica's sharp gaze moved to Rosalind. Though it seems dangerous for a human to be so close to someone with your strength." "Rosalind isn't afraid of me," Ravenna said simply. "She's the first person who wasn't. That's why she can help when no one else could." "Remarkable," Lady Seraphine murmured, studying Rosalind with new interest. "Tell me, Miss Newman, do you not fear for your safety?" "Every moment I'm with Ravenna is a gift," Rosalind replied honestly. "Yes, there's risk. But the reward seeing this incredible child grow and thrive is worth any danger. She's not a threat to be contained. She's a person who deserves love and support just like anyone else." The three council members exchanged glances. Then Lady Seraphine smiled, and it seemed genuine. "I believe I understand Lord Lysander's confidence in you now. And I must say, young mistress, you're far different from the rumors. You're quite impressive." Ravenna beamed, and Rosalind felt tension drain from the room. The rest of the meeting passed smoothly, ending with the council members expressing their support for Ravenna's continued residence in the main estate. After they'd left, Yorick pulled both Rosalind and Ravenna into an embrace that startled them both. "You were perfect," he told his daughter. "So brave and eloquent. I'm so proud of you." "I did it because Rosalind believed I could," Ravenna said, looking up at Rosalind with adoration. Yorick's gaze met Rosalind's over his daughter's head, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Gratitude, yes, but also something warmer, deeper, something that looked dangerously like longing. "She has a gift for bringing out the best in people," Yorick said softly, his eyes never leaving Rosalind's face. "I'm beginning to think there's nothing she can't accomplish." Later that night, after Ravenna was asleep, Yorick found Rosalind in the library as had become their custom. But tonight felt different. The air between them was charged with something electric. "Thank you," he said, moving to stand close to her, closer than was strictly appropriate. "For everything you've done, for Ravenna, and for me." "I didn't do anything for you," Rosalind said, though her voice came out breathier than intended. Having him this close made it hard to think clearly. didn't you? You gave me back my daughter. You showed me it was possible to reach her to help her heal." His hand lifted, hesitating near her face. "May I?" She nodded, unable to speak, and he cupped her cheek with infinite gentleness. His hand was cool but not cold, his touch reverent. "You've become important to me, Rosalind, far beyond your role as Ravenna's companion." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I find myself thinking about you constantly, looking forward to our conversations, seeking excuses to be near you." He smiled slightly. "It's extremely inconvenient for a vampire king to be so thoroughly distracted by a human woman." Rosalind's heart hammered against her ribs. "Yorick, if you don't feel the same, tell me now and I'll never speak of it again. Our friendship will continue unchanged, and your position here is secure, regardless. But if there's any chance you might return my feelings." He leaned closer, his breath cool against her face. "I need to know, because resisting the urge to kiss you is becoming impossible." She should say no. This was dangerous, foolish, a path that could only lead to heartbreak. He was immortal. She was human, destined to age and die while he remained unchanging. There was no future in this. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same loneliness she'd carried for so long. She saw someone who'd been alone for centuries, isolated by power and responsibility. She saw a man who was desperately, achingly alone, despite his crown and court. And she realized she'd been lying to herself for months. She didn't just care for him, she was in love with him. "Kiss me," she whispered. He did. His mouth met hers with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with his predatory nature. The kiss was soft, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. But Rosalind pressed closer instead, her hands coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat there, slower than a human's, but steady and strong. Yorick made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, one arm wrapping around her waist to pull her against him. He kissed like a man starving, like she was air, and he'd been drowning. But even in his intensity, he was careful, aware of his superior strength, treating her like something precious. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yorick rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks. Months, if I'm honest with myself." "I didn't think you saw me that way," Rosalind admitted. "I thought it was just gratitude about Ravenna." "It started that way, perhaps, but it became so much more." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I need you to understand what this means. I'm offering you my heart, Rosalind, but it comes with complications. The court will object to me being involved with a human. There may be danger from those who see you as a weakness to exploit. And there's the matter of mortality." Her stomach clenched. "You mean that I'll age and die while you stay young?" "Yes. Though there are options, if you're willing to consider them. Vampiric blood can extend human life significantly without full transformation. It's not true immortality, but it could give us centuries together." His expression was carefully neutral. "But that's a conversation for later if we decide this is what we both want. For now, I just need to know if you're willing to try, to see where this leads us." Rosalind thought of all the logical reasons to say no. The danger, the complexity, the impossibility of their situation. Then she thought of the way her heart lifted when he entered a room, the way their conversations filled her with joy, the way he looked at his daughter with such fierce protective love. "Yes," she said, "I'm willing to try. I want this, Yorick. I want you." He kissed her again, and this time there was triumph in it, joy and relief and hunger all woven together. When he finally released her, he was smiling in a way she'd never seen before, open and unguarded and almost boyish. "Then we'll face whatever comes together," he said. "You, me, and Ravenna, a family if you'll have us." Tears pricked Rosalind's eyes. "I'd like that very much." But their happiness was short-lived. 3 days later, everything fell apart. Rosalind woke to chaos. Alarms were blaring throughout the estate, vampires running through the halls with weapons drawn. She bolted from her bed, running for Ravenna's chambers, terror clutching her heart. The girl's room was empty, the bed still made. Ravenna hadn't slept there. "Yorick!" Rosalind screamed his name, running into the corridor. "Where's Ravenna?" He appeared at the end of the hall, moving with inhuman speed. His face was a mask of fury and fear. "She's been taken. Draven made his move. He took Ravenna as leverage, threatening to kill her unless I abdicate. Rosalind's world tilted. He what? How did he get past the guards? He had help from inside the estate, traitors I trusted. Yorick's hands clenched into fists. He's holding her in the old cathedral downtown, in the catacombs beneath, holy ground that limits my power. He's demanding I come alone, unarmed, or he'll kill her. It's a trap. Obviously, but I have no choice. She's my daughter. Then I'm coming with you. Rosalind grabbed his arm. Draven won't expect a human. I might be able to get close to Ravenna while you distract him. Absolutely not. You'd be killed. So would you if you walk into his trap alone. Yorick, please, let me help. Ravenna needs both of us. He looked torn, desperate. Finally, he nodded. Stay behind me. Do exactly as I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. They gathered a small force of loyal guards and raced through the city to the abandoned cathedral. It loomed against the night sky, gothic and crumbling, surrounded by overgrown graveyard. The moment they crossed onto the consecrated ground, Rosalind saw Yorick flinch. The holy ground was affecting him, draining his strength. I'll be weakened in there, he said grimly, but not helpless. Stay close. They descended into the catacombs, ancient stone passages lined with burial niches. The air was thick with dust and decay. And then they heard it. Ravenna's sobs echoing through the darkness. Father, Rosalind, help me! They ran toward her voice, emerging into a large chamber lit by torches. Ravenna was chained to a pillar in the center, silver manacles around her wrists that burned her pale skin. She was crying, terrified, but unharmed otherwise. Draven stood nearby, flanked by a dozen vampires in dark armor. He was tall and imposing with white hair, streaked with black, his crimson eyes filled with cold ambition. Yorick, how predictable. Draven smiled without warmth. You brought your pet human. How touching. Release my daughter. Now. Yorick's voice was deadly quiet. Your quarrel is with me. But she makes such effective leverage. The great vampire king, brought low by love for a broken child. Draven circled them slowly. Did you really think you could rule forever? Your methods are outdated. You're too soft, too concerned with morality and honor. The vampire world needs stronger leadership. What you call strength, I call cruelty. Ravenna is a child. She's done nothing to you. She's an abomination, a vampire born mad, a stain on our kind's reputation. Draven's expression turned ugly. But she's useful as a tool against you. So here's my offer. Abdicate voluntarily. Name me as your successor, and I'll let the child live. Refuse, and I'll kill her in front of you before I kill you. Rosalind was barely listening. She was focused on Ravenna, on the chains holding her, on the way the girl's eyes kept finding hers. And she saw something there, not just fear, determination. Ravenna had been working on controlling her power. She'd gotten so much stronger, so much more in command of herself. And the terror of being kidnapped, combined with the pain of the silver. Yorick, Rosalind whispered urgently, Ravenna's going to break free. Be ready. He glanced at her sharply, then looked at his daughter. Understanding flickered in his eyes. Almost imperceptibly, he nodded. You want me to abdicate? Yorick said, his voice carrying through the chamber. You want me to hand my crown to a coward who threatens children? Draven's face darkened with rage. I am no coward. You kidnapped a 7-year-old girl because you couldn't face me directly. What else would you call it? Yorick's contempt was withering. You're not fit to rule. You're barely fit to serve. Draven snarled and lunged forward, and that's when Ravenna made her move. The girl's eyes blazed crimson fire, brighter than Rosalind had ever seen. Power radiated from her in waves that made the air shimmer. She screamed, and it wasn't fear. This time it was rage. The silver chains shattered like glass. The pillar behind her cracked. Don't hurt my family! Ravenna shrieked, and the force of her power exploded outward. Several of Draven's soldiers were thrown backward, crashing into walls. Draven himself staggered, caught off guard. And Yorick moved with blinding speed despite the holy ground's effect. He crossed the space between them in a heartbeat, slamming into Draven with bone-crushing force. Rosalind! Ravenna cried out. Rosalind was already running, dodging around the fighting vampires. She reached Ravenna and pulled the girl into her arms, checking her for injuries. The burns on her wrists from the silver were healing already, vampire regeneration working quickly. "I've got you," Rosalind said. "You're safe now." "I broke the chains," Ravenna said, shaking but proud. "I controlled it. I didn't lose myself. I thought about what you told me about focusing my power, and I did it." "You did wonderfully." Rosalind held her close, watching Yorick fight. He and Draven were evenly matched despite Yorick's weakened state, trading blows that would have killed any human instantly. But Yorick had something Draven didn't: centuries of experience and the absolute determination of a father protecting his child. When Draven left an opening, Yorick took it. He drove his hand into the other vampire's chest, directly over his heart. "You threatened my daughter," he said, his voice cold as winter. "For that, there is no mercy." He tore Draven's heart from his chest. The rebel vampire crumbled to dust, defeated absolutely. His remaining followers immediately dropped their weapons and knelt in submission. The fight was over. Yorick stood there for a moment, covered in dust and breathing hard. Then he turned and saw Rosalind holding Ravenna, both of them safe, and his expression transformed from warrior to father in an instant. He crossed to them in 3 long strides and gathered them both into his arms. "My girls," he whispered, and Rosalind heard the shake in his voice. "My brave, precious girls." Ravenna was crying again, but these were tears of relief. "I did it, Father. I controlled my power. I helped. You were magnificent." He kissed the top of her head, then looked at Rosalind. "And you were right to come. I couldn't have done this without you." "We're a family," Rosalind said softly. "That means we face things together." Yorick kissed her then, fierce and quick, in front of all the assembled vampires. When he pulled back, his eyes blazed with emotion. Yes, a family. Exactly. The aftermath of Draven's attempted coup took weeks to sort through. Traitors were identified and dealt with. The council was restructured to prevent such a coordinated rebellion from happening again. And through it all, Ravenna continued to improve. The night terrors didn't disappear entirely, but they became manageable. Ravenna learned to recognize when one was starting and call for help before losing control. Her power, once wild and frightening, became something she could direct and channel. She was still only 7 years old, still learning and growing, but the haunted desperation had left her eyes. She had a family now, a father who adored her and a companion who loved her. She had safety and support, and she blossomed. As for Rosalind and Yorick, their relationship deepened into something profound. He courted her properly, with all the old-world elegance of his vampire nature. Gifts and poetry, moonlit walks through the gardens, conversations that lasted until dawn. He introduced her to his inner court as his partner, making it clear that anyone who disrespected her would answer to him personally. There were complications, of course. Some vampires objected to their king choosing a human mate. Rosalind had to learn the complex etiquette of vampire society, had to navigate politics that were literally centuries old. And there was always the awareness that time was their enemy, that her human lifespan was a countdown they both tried not to think about. But 6 months after that night in the catacombs, Yorick brought up the topic that had been hovering between them. They were in the library, their favorite place, curled together on one of the large sofas. Rosalind was reading while Yorick played with her hair, running the strands through his fingers with evident contentment. "I want to ask you something important," he said quietly. "But I need you to know there's no pressure. If you say no, it changes nothing between us. I'll love you regardless." Rosalind set down her book, turning to face him. "All right. I told you that vampire blood can extend human life significantly. What I didn't explain is the exact process." He took her hand, tracing patterns on her palm. "If you drink from me regularly, not enough to transform you, but enough for my blood to change your biology, you could live for centuries, 500 years, perhaps more. You'd retain your humanity, but gain significant longevity." Her breath caught. "That's a significant decision, I know. You'd outlive your siblings, your friends, everyone you knew in your human life. You'd be caught between 2 worlds, neither fully human nor fully vampire." His expression was serious. "I won't pretend there aren't costs, but it would give us time." "Rosalind, Centuries together instead of decades. Rosalind's mind spun. 500 years with Yorick, watching Ravenna grow up, being there for all her milestones, building a true life with this man she'd fallen so impossibly in love with, but also outliving her siblings, watching them age and die while she remained young, being forever marked as different, other. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course, take all the time you need." He kissed her forehead. "This is your choice entirely. I'll support whatever you decide." She thought about it for 3 weeks, weighing every angle. She talked to her siblings, explaining the situation as best she could. Her older brother told her to follow her heart. Her sister said that if she'd found real love, she should hold on to it. Finally, she went to Ravenna. "Can I ask your opinion about something?" Rosalind said as they sat together in the gardens watching fireflies dance in the twilight. "Always," Ravenna said, leaning against her. "Your father offered me something, a way to live much longer than normal humans do, but it would mean I'd be different from other humans, and I'd outlive a lot of people I care about." Rosalind chose her words carefully. "I'm trying to decide if I should accept." Ravenna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Would it mean you'd stay with us, with Father and me?" "Yes, for a very long time." "Then I think you should do it." Ravenna looked up at her with those ancient crimson eyes. "Because we need you, Rosalind. I need you. You're my person. You're the one who makes me feel safe, and Father loves you so much. I can tell. He's happier than I've ever seen him." Rosalind's throat tightened. "You'd really want me to stay that long?" "Forever, if possible." Ravenna hugged her fiercely. "You're my family. Please don't leave us." That decided it. That evening she found Yorick in his study, reviewing documents related to estate management. He looked up when she entered, a smile automatically crossing his face. "I have my answer," Rosalind said without preamble. He set down his papers immediately, giving her his full attention. "Yes?" "Yes." She crossed to him, taking his hands. "I want the extended life. I want centuries with you. I want to see Ravenna grow up, to be there for her, for both of you. Whatever complications come with it, we'll face them together." Yorick pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Are you certain? Once we begin the process, there's no going back." "I'm certain. I love you, Yorick. I love the life we're building. I'm not ready for it to end in a handful of decades." She pulled back to meet his eyes. "I want forever with you." He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When he finally released her, his eyes were bright. "Then forever is what you'll have. I'll take care of you, Rosalind. I swear it. You'll never regret this choice." "I know." The process began that night. It was surprisingly simple. She drank from a crystal glass filled with his blood. The taste strange, but not unpleasant. He explained she'd need to do this monthly for the first year, then less frequently as her system adapted. The changes were subtle at first. She felt stronger, healthier. Minor aches and pains she'd carried for years disappeared. Her senses sharpened slightly, but she remained fundamentally human, her heart beating at a human pace, her need for food and sleep unchanged. What did change was the knowledge that she had time, that the countdown had stopped, that she and Yorick could build something real and lasting without the shadow of mortality hanging over them. 1 year after Rosalind had first taken Ravenna's hand, Yorick proposed. He did it traditionally, going down on one knee in the gardens where they'd spent so many evenings talking. Ravenna was there to witness it, bouncing with barely contained excitement. "Rosalind Newman," Yorick said, holding out a ring with a bloodstone at its center, ancient and beautiful. "You came into our lives and changed everything. You saved my daughter, gave me back hope, and showed me that even an immortal heart can learn to love again. Will you marry me? Will you be my queen, my partner, my wife, for all the centuries to come?" "Yes," Rosalind whispered through happy tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her while Ravenna cheered. And Rosalind thought about how strange life was, how unpredictable. A year ago, she'd been scrambling to support her family, working multiple jobs, exhausted and alone. Now she had this, a man who loved her fiercely, a child who needed her, a purpose that fulfilled her, a family she'd never expected but couldn't imagine living without. The wedding took place 3 months later, a blend of vampire tradition and human custom. The ceremony was held at midnight in the estate's grand ballroom, attended by vampire nobility and Rosalind's human family in equal measure. She wore white, he wore black, and Ravenna stood between them as both flower girl and witness, beaming with pride. When Yorick kissed his bride, the assembled crowd erupted in applause, vampire and human together. It felt like a new beginning for all of them. The reception lasted until dawn, filled with music and dancing and celebration. Rosalind danced with Yorick, with her siblings, and with Ravenna, who was having the time of her life spinning in circles to the music. "Are you happy?" Yorick asked as they swayed together during a slow song, his arms around her waist. Rosalind looked around the ballroom. At Ravenna laughing with Lady Seraphine, the council member who'd become an unexpected friend. At her brother chatting with Lord Casimir about human-vampire trade relations. At the life they'd all built together, impossible and wonderful. "I'm more than happy," she said, reaching up to cup Yorick's face. "I'm home. With you and Ravenna, I'm finally home." He kissed her softly, tenderly. "Then we've all found what we were searching for, a family, a future, a place to belong." "And love," Rosalind added. "We found love." "The most important thing of all," Yorick agreed. Ravenna bounded over to them then, grabbing both their hands. "Can I live with you in your new chambers? I don't want to be alone at night still sometimes." Rosalind and Yorick exchanged glances, then smiled. "Of course," Rosalind said. "We're a family. That means we stick together." "Forever?" Ravenna asked hopefully. "Forever," Yorick confirmed, pulling both his daughter and his wife close. "For all the centuries ahead of us, the three of us together, always." And standing there with her husband and the child of her heart, Rosalind knew it was true. They'd found their forever, a strange, beautiful, impossible forever, but theirs nonetheless. The years that followed were filled with joy and challenge in equal measure. Ravenna grew up under Rosalind's careful guidance, learning to master her considerable power while retaining her compassion and kindness. She became a formidable young vampire princess, respected by the court not for fear, but for her genuine strength of character. Yorick proved to be as devoted a husband as he was a father, courting Rosalind anew each year with the romance and dedication of someone who understood just how precious their time together was. They traveled the world, exploring vampire courts in distant lands, learning about different cultures and traditions. They built schools and hospitals, working to bridge the gap between vampire and human communities. And through it all, they remained grounded in the love that had brought them together. The love that had started with a frightened child and a maid who wasn't afraid. The love that had grown into something vast and enduring. 20 years after their wedding, Rosalind stood in the gardens watching Ravenna, now a poised young woman of 27, demonstrate advanced magical techniques to a group of young vampire students. She was a natural teacher, patient and encouraging, helping others learn to control their abilities just as Rosalind had helped her. Yorick came up behind Rosalind, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Remarkable, isn't she?" "Extraordinary," Rosalind agreed. "I'm so proud of her. None of it would have been possible without you. You saw what she could become when everyone else only saw what she was. You believed in her." He turned Rosalind to face him. "You believed in both of us, and you gave us a future we'd never dared to hope for." "You gave me the same thing," Rosalind said, touching his face with fingers that still wore his ring. "A purpose. A family. A love I never expected to find." "Are you happy, my darling?" he asked, echoing the question from their wedding night. "After all these years, are you still happy with your choice?" Rosalind looked at her husband's beloved face, still as beautiful as the day she'd met him. She looked at Ravenna, teaching and laughing and confident in who she was. She thought about the life they'd built, the good they'd done, the love they'd shared. "I've never regretted it for a single moment," she said honestly. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be, with you, with her, with our family." Yorick smiled, and it was full of joy and contentment and bone-deep satisfaction. "Then we're both exactly where we need to be." He kissed her, soft and sweet. I love you, Rosalind. Today, tomorrow, for all the centuries to come. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. Forever. And as they stood together in the garden, watching their daughter shine, Rosalind reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. She'd been hired as a simple maid, assigned to work in a vampire's estate to support her family. She'd never imagined she'd end up as a queen, a mother, a woman who'd found her place in a world that existed between darkness and light. But life had a way of surprising you, of taking your hand and leading you somewhere you'd never expected to go. All you had to do was be brave enough to say yes, to reach out, to smile at someone everyone else feared and say, I'm not afraid of you. Because sometimes the most powerful magic wasn't blood or fangs or ancient power. Sometimes it was simply human compassion freely given to someone who desperately needed it. And sometimes that compassion could change the world. Ravenna finished her demonstration and ran over to them, still young enough to seek out hugs from her parents despite her grown status. She wrapped an arm around each of them, pulling them close. Best family ever, she declared, echoing words she'd said countless times over the years. Best family ever, Rosalind and Yorick agreed in unison, holding tight to the people they loved most in all the world. And in that moment, surrounded by love and laughter and the promise of centuries still to come, Rosalind knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice, that every moment of fear, every challenge overcome, every risk taken had been worth it. Because this love, this family, this life was everything she'd ever wanted and more than she'd ever dared to dream. She'd taken a frightened child's hand and smiled when everyone else turned away. And that simple act of kindness had led her here to a forever she wouldn't trade for anything in the world. The Vampire King's strange daughter wasn't strange at all in the end. She was just a girl who needed love, and the maid who'd given it to her had found her own forever in the process. It was a fairy tale, impossible and true. And like all the best fairy tales, it ended exactly as it should, with love conquering fear, family overcoming darkness, and everyone finding their happily ever after, together, always together, forever.